Hello everybody. Next we make our home debut for the season. Leicester City will be our opponents in a match that kicks off at 8 p.m. for the purpose of broadcast by Sky. Being a Monday, there shouldn't be any engineering works to consider, just the usual peak hour signal failures then. Leicester City then. Cup holders and charity shield. We'll have none of that community nonsense, thank you. Holders as well. That means that they're this year's bunch of supporters who consider the Charity Shield to be a proper trophy. For a year anyway. The Foxes opened their account with a 1-0 win over Wolves, though as the BBC put it, few would have described a point for the visitors as undeserved. I shan't bother you with the details of our relevant league placings. The days when I religiously updated the league ladder tables they used to give away in Shoot magazine for a week before realising I really couldn't be bothered to go through that rigmarole every week are long gone. Do they still do league ladders? I guess not in the day where every kid seems to be issued with a smartphone at birth, in the case of Spurs supporters, in the usually vain hope that they might have worked out how to turn it on by the time they're 30. I digress. Where were we? Oh yes, Leicester. Daisy, the beautiful personal assistant from whom I no longer have to socially distance myself, tells me that they've attempted something new and, it seems, innovative during the closed season. It seems they've been using the transfer window to actually buy players. It's an amazing concept and it'll be interesting to see if it catches on. First to arrive was Zambian striker Patson Daka, whose undisclosed fee seems to have been in the region of £23 million. He's come in from Red Bull Salzburg, with whom he got whatever it is they award to the top scorer and to the player of the year in the Austrian Bundesliga last season. The awards came courtesy of a league season in which he notched an impressive 27 goals in 28 league games. Presumably signed with one eye on the fact that Vardy is now 34, Daka got a brief run out in the traditional curtain raiser, trademark, but was an unused sub in the Wolves game. Boubakary Soumare's undisclosed fee is said to be in the region of £17 million. The defensive midfielder came in from Lille, having come through the ranks of both Paris and Paris Saint-Germain, before moving along the Euro-style route to Lille. He's been capped by the French at pretty much every level except for full international level. And he also made his debut as a sub in the Charity Shield. They also picked up a brace of players from Southampton. No need for Daisy to do any digging about for the value of the undisclosed fee for Ryan Bertrand, for the simple reason that there wasn't one. The sometime England and indeed Great Britain international arrived on a free with his contract at St Mary's having run itself to conclusion. A Wembley debut against Man City was followed up by a failed COVID test, which will preclude his appearance on Monday night. The other refugee from the south coast was Danish international Jannik Vestergaard. His undisclosed fee was about £15 million, a total which makes him the most expensive Danish player ever on a cumulative basis, it says here. His Premier League debut came on the hour as a sub in the Wolves match, as Amati and Sionchu were preferred starters in the middle of defence last weekend. Having dealt with their new signings, let's have a look at the wild and wacky world of association football. And it was a qualified welcome for the introduction of PGMOL's policy of applying the laws of the game as written, rather than as Liverpool would like them to be written. It worked, up to a point. Sure, Salah's triple rollover failed to pick up the cheated spot kick that it has invariably done in the past. However, is it too much to ask for the whole law to be applied? You know, including the bit about cautioning a player who's actually seeking to gain a penalty by simulating contact at a much higher level than actually took place. Still, Rome wasn't burnt in a day, I suppose. Spurs supporters, bless them, were all over the post-match radio phone-ins following their scraping of a surprise 1-0 victory over the defending champions. You see, Spurs are now definitely going to win the league, apparently. No, really. I guess when you're on the same UEFA pecking level as the likes of St Johnstone, Santa Clara, from the Azores apparently, and Anorthosis Famagusta, which sounds like a liver complaint from Cyprus, you need to cling on to those little delusions of adequacy, especially when you lose to a team named after an aftershave. And so let's move on to us. Firstly, congratulations to Michail Antonio, who it seems is about to make a belated arrival on the international scene with Jamaica. Whilst I'm pleased for the player, I can't be the only one whose first thought on hearing the news was simply the word hamstring, though. Meanwhile, the PAI saga continues. Since we last met, the fun and games started off with a rather poor article from Martin Samuel slating the PAI bid on the grounds that the Azerbaijani chap had claimed to be a supporter, and that involving the Ferdinands in the bid was somehow only one step short of asking Paul Ince to give his approval. What Mr. Samuel missed in his rant, which at times bordered on the xenophobic, was the opportunity to at least put the bid, as PAI claim it's happened, or non-bid, as GSB say, under some sort of scrutiny. The fact that both sides in the debate have been issuing contradictory and mutually exclusive statements is surely worth more investigation than the rather superficial rant that Mr. Samuel entered into. One side or the other must be telling porkies after all. Instead, what we got was something that could have been commissioned by Mr. Sullivan himself. I hasten to add I'm sure it wasn't, but given the lack of objectivity in the piece, one could easily be forgiven for looking at the article as some sort of thank you for maybe boardroom hospitality. Don't get me wrong, I'm not asking for Woodward and Bernstein here. It's the Daily Mail after all, but surely some sort of journalistic curiosity wouldn't have gone amiss. Not that the foregoing should be construed as my being supportive of PAI as such. I'm as cynical as the next man whenever I hear PR execs spouting out about just how important they are to the world in general. Yeah, I know it's a stereotype, but over the years I've met many who conform to that stereotype. However, if any group could do with PR lessons in how not to damage your own metatarsals whilst in possession of a loaded firearm, it's PAI. In over a lifetime of working what you might loosely refer to as the world of finance, I've probably been involved in the compilation of more due diligence reports than Neil Ruddock has had hot dinners, so I appreciate how these things work, and the limitations placed on what can and can't be said publicly whilst takeovers are under discussion. However, even accounting for that, the public comments made by PAI and its spokespeople have been so vague and woolly as to be practically meaningless. Let's chuck in a few Olympic legacy comments here and a few words about tarting up the stadium for football purposes there and see what happens. That seems to be the approach at the moment. It's fair to say our current owners are not universally liked, and every poll that I have seen over different platforms seems to indicate that the majority of supporters would prefer them to go. So PAI must be somewhat concerned that their own poll ratings dive faster than Salah in the penalty box after every statement or radio interview they give. I mean, given the strength of opposition to the current owners, it shouldn't be too difficult to get supporters on side, should it? Whilst on the subject of the boardroom, I see that two of the directors appointed back in January have resigned, according to Companies House. Back in January, I suggested it was unfair to suggest that, in particular, the appointment of Ms. Emma Jane Evelyn Benton Hughes, also known in cinematic circles as Eve Vorley, apparently, had been made purely to circumvent the COVID rules on attending matches. I was sure at the time that Ms. Benton Hughes' career in cinema probably gave her a wealth of experience in running a multi-million-pound business like a football club, even if she was repeatedly overlooked at Oscar time. Her resignation, as soon as the restrictions were lifted, was therefore purely a coincidence in timing, in my opinion. Clearly there must be another reason for her departure. I wonder if all is well at home. On the pitch we came away with all 3 points in a match which showed in microcosm everything that was both good and bad about the team at the moment. Not that such proof were needed, but proof nevertheless that we'll need to strengthen the squad if we are to be competitive over the many fronts on which we will do battle this season. Let's start with the bad. After all, that's the way the match went. Some of our defending in the first half was atrocious. Dawson had a magnificent start to his Irons career. Kicking the Southampton player in the head was a particular highlight. But the fact remains is he was originally signed as a squad player. Balbuena's departure has left it a bit short in that department, and with Ogbonna clearly lacking sharpness after his recent injury, the 2 goals we conceded were the result of some really slapdash defending. Better teams than Newcastle will have a field day if we carry on playing like that. Let's move on to the good though. We looked decent going forward on the break, particularly in the second half. Ben Rama had what I think is his best competitive game in a West Ham shirt. Yes, the tricks and flicks were all there, but they were applied at the right time. Antonio continues to delight and frustrate. Someone tell me how a player can hit a spot kick that badly, then finish a much more difficult chance from an angle so superbly. We do need to sort out the penalty-taking situation. It's Noble's final season, and barring injury, his appearances are going to be limited to sub-appearances. Maybe some starts at 1 or 2 of the cups. We're therefore without a reliable and regular taker at the moment. I've suggested Cresswell in the past. He's got good dead ball skills. I have an inkling that were Souček called upon, he might be reliable as well. Either way, we need to be settling on someone and stating that that's our regular penalty taker. On the injury front, we're down to just the one, that being Arthur Masuaku, whose knee is slowly but surely getting better. Leicester, on the other hand, have a number of issues on the medical front. Definitely out are Evans, ankle, Bertrand, COVID as mentioned, James, knee, Fofana, calf and Mendy, groin. There are additional doubts over Maddison, who hurt his back in the Wolves game, and Castagni, who's got an eye socket fracture. This brings me on to the subject of the prediction. Well, clearly Leicester will be a tougher proposition than Geordies were, but it's hoped that some of the rustiness will have been knocked out of our defence in training over the last week or so. For Leicester's part, we'll give them more to think about going forward than Wolves did, hopefully. On the whole, I think this has the capacity to be something of a cracker. And in the spirit of continuing our early season optimism, I'm going to plump for us to shade this one. So let's put the £2.50 I was going to spend on a bet that Salah would dive in his first match. I couldn't find a bookie to take the wager. And let's put it on us to edge a thriller. 3-2 to us. Enjoy the game.
Yes. And big knees up Mother Brown, man.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm regularly on the general discussion page. There's always someone who's got some information, so I love it. Yeah. It's great. Yes, it's excitement surrounded by imminent disappointment. That's what it mostly is.
Get on the forum at kumb.com. Come on, you irons.